Check, check, check. Hello. Goes up the speaker. Hello. Hi. Now that Eric is here, we can introduce him as a speaker. This is not good. I'd like to introduce a friend of mine, a local guy, James Wilford. He's written a series of fictional books about Babylon. I'm going to admit that I haven't read them all yet, but I did read the first one, and this is amazing to me because I haven't read something even though it looks like that. I did notice it's kind of fun, so I believe to do the other possibility and he is Christian invisible. Definitely worth it. Because I don't have your bio. James Wilbur has he works and lives here in Minneapolis. Are y'all listening? No. I'm talking to you all. Everyone's trying to come up and take a seat up here, so I don't have to tell too loud. I don't want to do a short note. I'm going to actually say it, so please, have a seat. Okay. So anyway, James Wilbur is a twisted, not right individual. But he is a full solution. That I can sell because I worked in that same industry as a volunteer. He has done a lot. I enjoyed it. I read the first book and got out to talk about it. And it's fictional and it's fun. So, without any further ado, here we go.
My presentation is going to be a little bit different. I'm a writer, like Lori said, so this is going to be more of a reading. I'm going to play to my strengths. I can use words and stuff. And it is about who is Babylon. You who are waiting to take me to yourselves, and do not pursue me from your vision, and do not make your sound hate me nor your hearing. Do not be ignorant of me at any place or any time. Be on guard. Do not be ignorant of me. For I am the first and the last. I am the honored and the scorned. I am the harlot and the holy one. I am the wife and the virgin. I am the mother and the daughter. I am the members of my mother. For I am knowledge and ignorance. I am shame and boldness. I am unashamed and I am ashamed. I am strength and I am fear. I am war and peace. Give heed to me. I am the disgrace and the exalted one. These are the words of Thunder Perfect Mind, written sometime in the early centuries of the Common Era, when ancient philosophy and paganism and mystery religions and Christianity created a stew called Gnosticism. Who is this woman that contains multitudes? Surely to encompass such a dichotomy of being, these are the claims of a goddess. But who? The statement, I am, echoes the ancient hymns to Isis, For the Gnostics, Isis was analogous with Sophia, the principle of wisdom, and in her way, a manifestation of Yahweh's wife, Ashara. And so we have, almost 2 millennia before Gerald Gardner and his all-encompassing goddess, a universal feminine divine. It seems too good to be true from a historical sense that a goddess fitting Babylon's description did exist a mere 500 miles across the Roman pond, where John the Revelator wrote about her with awe and disgust. That she meets all the requirements in the Kabbalistic sense as well, that she is our Babylon, the wisdom of womanhood. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that John of Patmos was well aware of Gnostic ideas taking form in Egypt and was alarmed by them. While he had much reason to hate the Roman government at the time, his screed against the emperors was only part of his beef, a rail against the current regime. He also feared the challenge of Gnosticism, the challenge of duality, especially since that challenge came from those who identified themselves as Christians. Truth be told, John's beliefs aligned more with his Roman oppressors than he ever realized. In the centuries to come, the Emperor of the East, knowing a good idea when he sees one, adopts Christianity, which seems almost tailor-made for the Roman mentality, with its idea of one God, one king, one law, one church. And so the victors write the history and the Bible. The Council of Nicaea purged Gnosticism from the burgeoning Christianity, and Babylon is relegated to the role of apocalyptic boogeywoman, sexed up with a touch of the old symbolism, but still no doubt the villain in John's tale. So under the repression of an overbearing Christian church, it's 1,500 years until any mystic gives her a chance. Words strangely similar to thunder perfect mind are received by the famous magician John Dee and his seer Edward Kelly. To Kelly she spoke, "I am the daughter of fortitude and ravished every hour from my youth, for behold, I am understanding. No coy illusion, she is the goddess of wisdom. And science dwelleth in me, and the heavens oppress me. They covet and desire me with infinite appetite, for none that are earthly have embraced me. For I am shadowed with the circle of the sun, and covered with the morning clouds. My garments are from the beginning, and my dwelling place is in myself. The lion knoweth not where I walk, neither do the beasts of the field understand me. I am." Once again, the words "I am" echo. The same as thunder perfect mind, the same as the prayers given to Isis before the birth of Christ. It's hard to believe that Kelly, who was an Oxford dropout, had knowledge of these ancient prayers before the West even learned to decipher hieroglyphs. And yet, those words are what are constantly echoed. Deflowered and yet a virgin, I sanctify and am not sanctified. Once again, she is all-encompassing between the opposites. Happy is he that embraceth me, for in the night season I am sweet, and in the day full of pleasure. My company is a harmony of many symbols, and my lips sweeter than health itself. I am a harlot for such as ravish me, and a virgin with such as know me not. Alas, more of a vizier than a witch, Dee is disturbed by these words. Later, when the spirits tell Kelly that they should swap wives, Dee is further disturbed and they have a falling out. Was it Babylon that gave these instructions? It certainly follows her modus operandi. In future encounters, we'll see a goddess that uses the most powerful tool in her arsenal, sex, to change the minds of men. It's this power that men fear. It's the power that demonizes Jezebel. It's the power that topples kingdoms and kings. The ultimate eschaton lies between her legs, capable of destroying everything you think you know about yourself and what you are capable of. But the always reluctant bee refuses her, and she moves on, waiting another 300 years to find what seems like the perfect emissary. Strong-willed, virile, magically endowed, a man with appetites. After surviving a soul-crushing childhood in the household of Plymouth Brethren, a sect that thought the Anglican Church was just too racy, our dear old Uncle Al was ready to embrace anything that his parents were against, and that included the ultimate bad girl of Revelations. Crowley fetishized the images of her astride the beast, especially since he saw himself as the beast she should be riding. He describes her power. This is the mystery of Babylon, the mother of abominations, and this is the mystery of her adulteries, for she hath yielded up herself to everything that liveth, and hath become a partaker in its mystery. And because she hath made herself the servant of each, therefore is she become the mistress of all. Not as yet canst thou comprehend her glory. Beautiful art thou, O Babylon, and desirable, for thou hast given thyself to everything that liveth, and thy weakness hath subdued their strength. For in that union thou didst understand, therefore art thou called understanding, O Babylon, lady of the night. She's the most interesting figure never even mentioned in the Book of the Law. And it seems at times that Crowley doesn't really know what to do with her. For him, she remains eternally across the abyss. Not for a lack of wanting. Crowley pursues her as a man pursues water in a desert, but he never gives in to her. His giant ego prevents it. She at least gets mentioned in the Gnostic Mass and makes the shortlist for the Gnostic Creed. It's also plainly obvious that the words of the priestess in the Gnostic Mass are the words of Babylon. Once again, we see the chain as the words sound familiar to those who have read Dee and Kelly's encounter. The priestess speaks, "But to love me is better than all things, and under the night stars and in the desert thou presently burnest my incense before me, invoking me with a pure heart, and the serpent flame therein. Thou shalt come a little to lie in my bosom. For one kiss wilt thou be willing to give all, but whoso giveth one particle of dust shall lose all in that hour." Apparently, Crowley wasn't willing to lose that. Incapable of following his own instructions, capable of surrendering himself, he transforms her into a concept, nails her to the tree of life like he does everything else, and lets her die a slow death. He makes her into an office, his Scarlet Woman, and each of Crowley's moles are called the Scarlet Woman, and yet somehow they manage to be underneath the beast that they're supposed to be riding. At least until he tires of them, or they tire of him. This is not surprising, for once again we have a court wizard proclaiming her. Crowley is so obsessed with organizing cables and abstracting the universe into 10 convenient Sephiroth that he never experiences her power. And she must be experienced. Thelema, and here I'm talking about the big T Thelema, the faith, not the concept, is another solar-centric religion that has God the Sun at the center. Thelema, like its founder, cannot truly represent her. Though they claim ownership, and some ridiculously try to separate her from the horror of Revelations, she is not their goddess, at least not entirely. Thelema suffers because Crowley never got over his fear of God the Father. "I never hated the one true God, just the God of the people I hated," doesn't leave room for a goddess. Luckily, Crowley rubs off just enough on the hero who comes to her rescue. Her Marvel, that would be Marvel Whiteside Parsons, later changed his name to John, known to his friend as Jack. The American rocket scientist, who, inspired by tales of Greek fire, created the fuel that sent men to the moon. He understood that you couldn't usher in the eschaton while sitting next to the powers that be, that you need to side with the people, because all movements always come from the ground up. It's the people who say no more and cause the wheel to turn, not the scholars and the schemers, who only later co-opt the movement for their own ends. In Parsons' book, Freedom is a Two-Edged Sword, he does not declare himself Catholic. He does not hide in the library. He is out in the darkened woods with the people. He names the true disciples of Babylon. We are the witchcraft. We are the oldest organization in the world. When man was born, we were. We sang the first cradle song. We healed the first wound. We comforted the first terror. We were the guardians against the darkness, the helpers on the left-hand side. Rock drawings in the Pyrenees remember us, and little clay images made for an old purpose when the world was new. Our hand was on the old stone circles, the monolith, the dome, and the druid oak. We sang the first hunting songs. We made the first crops to grow. Sometimes we move openly, sometimes in silence and in secret. Night and day are one to us, calm and storm, seasons and the cycles of man. All these things are one, for we are at its roots. Our knowledge is in the eyes of goats and of women. Always a rebel, Jack Parsons ignores Crowley's warnings and performs his own magnum opus, the Babylon Working. From it, in an act of supreme arrogance and disregard for his superiors in the OTO, he produces his own chapter for Crowley's precious Book of the Law. Finally, the Red Goddess gets her due in Liber 49, the Book of Babylon. From the get-go, Parsons calls the Aeon of Horus, that would be Crowley's magical new age, the shitstorm that it is. In the introduction of the Book of Babylon, he writes, "The present age is under the influence of the force called in magical terminology Horus. This force relates to fire, Mars, and the sun, that is, to power, violence, and energy. It also relates to a child being innocent. Its manifestations may be noted in the destruction of old institutions and ideas, the discovery and liberation of new energies, and the trend towards power governments, war, infantilism, and schizophrenia. This force is completely blind, depending upon the men and women whom it manifests and who guide it. Obviously, its guidance now tends towards catastrophe. The catastrophic trend is due to our lack of understanding of our own nature, the hidden lust, fears, and hatred resulting from the warping of the love urge, which underlie the natures of all Western people, have taken a homicidal, suicidal direction. This impasse is broken by the incarnation of another sort of force called Babylon. The nature of this force relates to love, understanding, and Dionysian freedom, and is the necessary counterbalance or correspondence to the manifestation of Horus. The book also contains instructions on how to honor her, that we are the ones who gather on blasted heaths in Sabbaths, not a description of a bunch of solid citizens. Her ways are not shackled by astrological determinism or gematria number games. Her ways are the witch ways. And unlike Crowley, there's no Victorian mealy-mouthed metaphor. Thy tears, thy sweat, thy blood, thy semen, thy love, thy faith shall provide. Ah, I shall drain thee like a cup that is of me, Babylon. Let me behold thee naked and lusting after me, calling upon my name. Let me receive all thy manhood within my cup, climax upon climax, joy upon joy. Apologists for Crowley often say that he worked within the constraints of Victorian sensibilities, that he disguised his sexual metaphor to avoid persecution. And maybe that's true, but Parsons wrote this in 1945 when sodomy was still illegal, even in California, and truly he was a man of his time. But being only a man, he falls into the same trap as Crowley, sees his manifestation as Babylon, as his scarlet woman, as a possession. To his dismay, she never realizes her true destiny. Parsons would die in fire, an accident happening while he mixed explosives. The newly born OTO went through its first growing pains, and interest in Babylon dwindled. Their credit keeping that thin thread alive until the 1960s, when Crowley's glowering image on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's was a ghost that whispered in the ears of those who were building the counterculture. 50 years later, in 2007, a new prophet emerges. She presents herself to another Englishman, for on that tiny island we have a unique melange of an ineffectual and tepid Christian church, significant magical subcultures such as Wiccans, Druids, Stelamites, chaos magicians, neo-pagans, traditional witches. He's a man dedicated to the old ways who started a publishing company just to print the book devoted to her. Peter Gray, founder of Scarlet Imprint, knows where the power of Babylon comes from, and he is not afraid. In The Red Goddess, he says, Babylon is lust, sexual, primal power. Lust knows no limits. Lust violates moral sense. Lust is strength, vitality, and joy. Lust is action. Why do we hesitate to call Babylon a goddess of love? Love has been bled almost to death, drained to an insipid pink, when it should be shameless scarlet. The commercialized face of love is the very opposite of lust, a weak, warm fuzz of nebulous good feelings. The arrows of Eros are no longer barbed, but smothered in sentiment. The hounds of love are muzzled. It is a product without passion, a stupefying cocoon. And here, for the first time, we see Babylon with a purpose. She's here to rescue love from the greeting card companies and bad romance novels. She's here to rescue women from sexual denial and repression. She's here to rescue all of us from our monolithic, misogynistic culture. To approach the holy whores to reclaim our pagan heritage from the distorted lies of Christianity. To some, this sounds profoundly satanic. But this is not the inversion of Christianity that leads down a pathway to the black mass and ill use of goats and truly bad music. This is a breaking of the seals of our pagan past and rediscovering of our primal power. It is a journey beyond taboo into the dark places of our soul. And later on, Peter Gray would backpedal on his opinion of the black mass and the virtues of it. The black mass is spiritual terrorism, an act of defiance against the dominant Christian empire, discounted as mere inversion or straight perversion by many witches, magicians, and pagans. This is in fact our tantra. As such, the black mass deserves a place in the history of Babylon. It should not forget that she is here to bring forth the Antichrist. Our society is not Hindu, it is Christian beneath the secular gloss. Our taboos and social structures are very different to those of India. So it makes more sense to use our native traditions to achieve our liberation. We may not be medieval peasants, but we all need to destroy our Christian conditioning if we want to be free. The black mass is the perfect way to do this. We have all made pacts with the horned one in childhood. Should we not go forth and celebrate him at least one night a year? Why pussyfoot around the subject of the devil? Why are we afraid to affirm like the Cathars that Christ was a false prophet? Surely it cannot hurt to indulge in a little blasphemy. If we are unwilling to consider the Black Mass as an integral part of our natural history, then we are failing to challenge ourselves on the deepest level. And I think it's important here to look carefully at what is said and unsaid. Because I, for one, would not advocate spitting venom on Christians. Not only because openly fighting the dominant paradigm is suicide, but it violates the principles that bring us together, that principle to do as thou wilt. If I were to vilify Christians for choosing to follow the Prince of Peace, I would be just as guilty as evangelicals. And while I fail to understand why they would choose the neither path, good luck to them on their quest. What I am advocating, and what Babylon facilitates, is a breaking down of our ingrained, oftentimes subconscious prohibitions. One must be willing to burn a Bible in the comforts of one's own temple, not as an act of denigration, but as a way to destroy one's own vestigial needs to obey. Babylon will, if you give her your heart and soul, take you to the understanding that nothing is true and everything is permitted. Service to Babylon also requires a disdain for those who would misuse power as a means of repression and control. If you do not attract to antinomian tendencies, she may not be the goddess for you. It's important to reiterate here that this is not an attack on those victimized by power. Our only duty to them is to let them know how much fun we're having. Those who follow the witch ways should not simply seek to replace those in dominion. What she really wants is complete self-immolation in the cause of complete freedom. Most eloquently, Peter Gray puts it, we must aim for liberation. Babylon is at war with limitation. For you, that may be Christianity or Islam or capitalist consumerism. Her injunction is simple: destroy all limits with love. And this leads us to the ultimate reason why a magician would submit themselves to the ultimate chaos that is Babylon. For the apocalypse, of course. That word, however, has become synonymous with Armageddon and the horror show that leads up to the Battle of Megiddo, where Christ and Antichrist slug it out by proxy. And I'm fairly certain that that's not the end product that most of us are seeking. To describe what we want, a sea change in consciousness, a universal acceptance of the law of Thelema, modern magicians and idealists have adopted the word eschaton. Eschaton is the end and a new beginning. Eschaton is acceptance of humans as part of the biosphere and as spiritual beings. Eschaton is the overturning of current political systems to something of the people. Some believe this means destroying and leaving behind civilization. And they say, go back, retreat to the farms and the woods, hide in the fairy places. We must abandon our folly. They pretend that we can put the genie back in the bottle. The idea is foolishness. The singularity is here. The Aeon of Horus flares out quickly like a temper tantrum. Many would also argue that we just haven't given Horus a chance. All this bloodshed is just the beginning pain of a new Aeon. We only have to wait a bit more before his illumination shines upon us. I'm sorry. I just don't trust a warrior god, especially one with his numbers. No Aeon in our history directly coincides with this revelation. The prophecy either comes before or after the event. In the case of the Book of the Law, it comes woefully too late to act as a warning. It is only an explanation, a window into the change of gestalt towards infantilism. Only this child does more than pluck the wings off butterflies. Hindsight pegs the start of the Aeon of Horus at the Enlightenment, the age that culminates with the rise of Napoleon, who introduces us to the citizen army, so that whole nations can participate in the orgy of bloodshed. And since then, we have had the Napoleonic Wars with 3.5 million dead, the American Civil War with 750,000 dead, the Russo-Japanese War, 136,000, the Franco-Prussian War, 167,000, World War I, 16 million dead, World War II, 60 million dead, and the accompanying Holocaust with over 10 million dead. And none of this includes the colonial genocides of indigenous people and all the other wars before, between, or since. This is not a hiccup. These are not growing things. This is a record indicative of a world gone mad. While war was certainly a constant in the ages before, seldom were they mass slaughter. Ancient wars are characterized by ceremonial combat and fighting between warrior classes, with the occasional sacking of a city. The main characteristic of modern warfare is the deliberate targeting of civilians for strategic purposes. From those filled with the bloodlust of the falcon of war, no one is safe. So the Aeon horse has to go. And some of us would say, well, fuck, the aeons last a millennium. If that's not necessarily so, there is every indication that the progress of aeons, like computer processing power, flows exponentially. Using our most familiar aeonic system given to us by Crowley, if you perceive the aeon of Isis as a goddess-centered hunter-gatherer prehistory, then it lasted a good 140,000 years. If the aeon of Osiris is God-centered, agricultural, and civilized, then it lasted a mere 12,000 years. How long will the aeon of Horus last? Will it be a tenth or 100 of that ruled by Osiris? Time will tell. Our job as magicians is to promulgate the character that new aeon will take. This time, there's too much at stake to lose to the Black Brothers. There are too many who wish to twist the minds of men to selfishness and denial. The first thing, I believe, to prevent our eschaton from becoming the horror of Armageddon is that we must get back in harmony with our nature. And the only way to do this is to know our nature. As it is writ large over the entrance of the Temple of Delphi, where the oracles gave their wisdom, know thyself. And once again, we can look to the Red Goddess. As noted, she was with us from the start of civilization in the Holy Land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, and thousands of years before, when we made rough-hewn fetishes of a goddess that was all tits and hips and cunt. And yet, as old as the goddess of Willendorf is, her age is but a fraction of the 150,000 years that have passed since Homo sapiens have stood upright on the plains of Africa. If we are to know ourselves, isn't it vital to know who we were at the beginning? Who we have been for the vast majority of human history before we built cities? Sadly, little can be known. Little, but we do know some things, and unsurprisingly, we have evidence that we just may be Babylon's yet. The first thing we can examine is our own biology, hardly changed since those times. We are one of the few mammals with no estrous cycle. Humans are ready to fuck at the drop of a loincloth. In its place, the menstrual cycle regulates breeding, but not appetite. Human males sport a larger penis and larger testicles than all save one of the primates. But gentlemen, before you pound your chest in pride over having a bigger dick than a gorilla, it's time to bust some common myths. The idea that females are the coy, demure, and reserved half of the species when it comes to sex has proven to be absurd. In their groundbreaking book, Sex at Dawn, Christopher Ryan and Casilda Jetta write, Despite repeated assurances that women aren't particularly sexual creatures in cultures around the world, men have gone to extraordinary lengths to control female libido. Female genital mutilation, head-to-toe shadows, and even witch burnings, chastity belts, suffocating corsets, muttered insults about insatiable whores, pathologizing the paternalistic medical diagnosis of nymphomania or hysterica, the debilitating scorn heaped on any female who chooses to be generous with her sexuality. All parts of a worldwide campaign to keep the supposedly low-key female libido under control. Why the electrified high-security razor wire defense in a kitty fight? So the concept that females have no sexuality, or the concept that females choose mates based solely on their loyalty and ability to provide for their children, is false. These are ideas that are but a thin veneer painted on women by misogynist civilizations. The truth is, the men's organs developed solely for sperm competition. True natural selection takes place on the microscopic battlefield. Our big cocks and unique thrusting motion are designed to remove previous semen deposits. Our giant testicles produce huge amounts of sperm in order to overcome a rival's forces within the womb. And in case you haven't caught on, this means that biologically speaking, we are designed to fuck a woman who has had sex with multiple males at the same time. In essence, each vagina is a holy grail holding the blood of many saints. As psychologist Mary Jane Shirky explained, the sexual hunger of the female and her capacity for copulation completely exceeds that of any man. To all intents and purposes, the human female is sexually insatiable. Women as a whole are much closer to Babylon than Mary and Byron. But why is that beneficial to a species to be fuck machines? Perhaps we can turn to our closest genetic relatives, the one primate that does have bigger balls than us, the bonobo ape. While other primates, when confronted with a new food source, will proceed to pummel each other senseless so that the biggest, strongest, and most violent gets the largest share, bonobos take a different approach. Upon discovering an abundance of food, the matriarchal bonobos throw an orgy. Only after renewing their social bonds and blowing off steam, male on female, female on female, male on male, do they take the time to share the feast as equally as they can. As magicians, as sculptors of a new aeon, the question we have before us is this: which type of ape would you rather be? The warrior chimp or the sex-loving bonobo? Me, I side with Babylon's dude. If we as magicians envision a new era where war is anathema, an aeon of peace and cooperation, an aeon with no restrictions on who and how we love, then we must turn to Babylon as both role model and standard bearer for a new age to come. So is the next aeon the aeon of the Red Goddess? I think Parsons had it right when he said Babylon was a means to temper and then, if necessary, destroy the aeon before us, not the main aeonic current. As a witch goddess, she represents the other, the outsider. She can never truly be of an age because she always seeks to destroy an age. What will replace Crowley's crowned and conquering child remains unknown. As I have said, is up to us as magicians, as cultural warriors, and people of a shared planet. If the law of this age is do as thou wilt, perhaps we should ponder what the law of the next age should be. Some say we will move straight on to a magical paradigm, an aeon of Baphomet. Sadly, there's little evidence to support this conclusion. For those who wish to see, however, the nature of the next aeon seems radically clear. If doing what we will without forethought is shown to be a recipe for catastrophe, perhaps now we can step back, examine the wreckage for evidence, and learn something from it. Knowledge is key. We can see it exploding all around us. We have created an infosphere, a meanosphere, a reality of pure thought of titanic proportion and potential. Perhaps know thy true will shall be the whole of the law in the next age. For the first time in human history, this may be possible. If the Lhp has elevated us to gods, then do we not suffer the same limitations as the Godhead? If we, as magicians, believe that creation is nothing but what we will it to be, how can we know anything else? How can we look at ourselves when we have no other perception? How can we truly know ourselves when we have no one else's opinion? We must do then what gods do. We must create. The next aeon, the aeon of thought, when we truly know ourselves, can happen, most likely will happen, when we perfect artificial intelligence. Among the technological eschatologists, this is called the singularity, when our machines become smarter than we are, and design even smarter machines until the exponential explosion of knowledge makes all things possible. Perhaps then Baphomet will come around. For now, it's time for me and men like me to stand aside. I appear before you today completely embarrassed because I am not a worthy messenger. For all the prophets of Babylon I have named have had a single unifying characteristic, a cock. And perhaps genitalia are not the defining characteristics of gender, but all of them have certainly identified themselves as male. And sorry to anyone who's androgynous, Babylon has always been a decidedly female goddess. What we need, and perhaps what this aeon has made possible, is for the woman to become the penultimate scion of Babylon. While women have held power, have been her disciples, and have served her throughout the ages, their voices have been squashed and erased by the patriarchal culture at large. Remember, it was Rose Kelly that was first visited by Alos. Crowley was only following instructions. So it's time for the beast to look aside and stop gnashing his teeth and hogging the spotlight. He was always just Babylon's bride anyway. Let her come forth, banner in her left hand, rail in her right, girt in love, the sword of lust at her side. Bring on the new land. Ave Babylon. My book is a work of fiction. The genesis for it was my love-hate relationship with Aleister Crowley. I looked at him and why is he the greatest magician of our time? Why is he so respected? Well, because he created a religion and he got people to believe it. That's a pretty huge magical act. I don't believe in holy books. I didn't think I wanted to start my own religion, but I am a writer. I do tell stories, and my Babylon is kind of that story of what I might think how a new aeon can come around. I'm open to discussion and questions. You all right? That's a sticky question for me. I know a lot of people who try to like smush as many gods together as they can, and I tend to separate things because I'm looking to a specific god for a specific purpose. I would think, just like people, gods evolve. And Ishtar was a whore and a warrior god. And so is Babylon, the whore of Babylon. And I do. And
What is that?
she was beloved.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Therefore, the way it's spoken is misstated by a person in
So to answer your question, yes, same goddess. But I see a lot of the modern writings on Babylon as sort of that, taking our Christian symbolism and inverting it and running with it. You know, at the time, there was no Christianity. To me, Babylon, her warrior aspect has become a attack against the current regime. Absolutely. And just like a pentagram is the sign of Satan and the pentagram is the sign of the Eastern Church, it is a tool. The aeonic structure is a tool for magicians to use. And how are you going to use it? Because, okay, well, you've got to respect it because it is a dominant construct. You only have to see how many Left Behind novels to realize exactly how powerful that current is. And if you're a magician, I say tackle. I am absolutely not a bonobo and I am not a chimp, but I am a primate. And I am sharing 98.9% of the same genes as a bonobo. Now, the idea of using the bonobo as an example is really the only evidence that we have to try to go and look at what a prehistoric human culture may have been like. And I'm not saying exactly like. Absolutely, it's culture. Like with chimps. Okay, now the idea that chimps have wars and are warriors is a strange idea because even the biologists that studied chimps later on admitted that they influence that culture. They influence that environment. They dump a huge amounts of food into the chimp culture, and that itself might have changed. So yes, culture is a choice, absolutely a choice. What do you want to be closer to?
Well, I think what James stated that even before the level is fed so much in thousands of years that this is a very foreign country.
Absolutely.
And why not take that energy for ourselves and develop this ability?
I would say it has always been a magician's tool. That, in fact, that society and culture and life in general is a continuation. You know, I know epochs, the ups and downs and turns around, but this is how we describe ourselves. This is how we mythologize, make our own myth. Is put these epochs in.
I totally get it because when I create a schedule and I upload it to Facebook, I do that on purpose because I know that the more people that look at that signal and give it their energy, the more energy that signal has. And imagine, like, take the McDonald's signal.
Yeah, that's
Who
the other
doesn't
presentation I have
freaking
doing
know
here.
what the golden oxygen is? I mean, that's a huge signal that is so ingrained in not only the